Hi, Jerry again. I just wanted to try to do a short tutorial on fractions related to ratios and proportions. One of the critical things to remember in fractions is that we're talking about part over the whole. Okay, hopefully you can read my hand scratching here, but anyway, some portion or part over the whole. Okay, and when we look at things like that, that's 1/2, 3/16, that kind of thing. And what this describes, as I said, this is three parts of a larger whole that has a total of 3 plus another 13, right? Okay, so the fraction is 3 out of 16. 3 out of 16, part to the whole. Or 1 out of 2 is a lot simpler to draw. There's two things in the set, and what we're identifying in the numerator on top is just one of those two. And the denominator, in this case, refers to the entire set that we're describing, if I can describe it as a set. Hopefully that helps. Now, when we go to ratios or proportions, basically what we're talking about is two different parts. So it's, I'll try to print, part 1, and sometimes you'll see it referred to with a colon, part 2, or part, I'm just going to abbreviate now, part 1, 2, part 2, or part 1 in part 2, or part 1 per, P-E-R, per part 2. And so I know that that can be a bit confusing, but let me try to translate that now into something that's English and we might understand. So in the case of being proportional, what we'll see is they'll give us one ratio and then they'll give us another one to compare to it. So one of my favorites is, is it two-cycle engines require the mixture of gas and oil? So you can buy these little containers to put into a gallon of gas, and sometimes I feel lazy, so I just buy those little tiny containers of two-cycle oil, and they are pre-measured to be 2.5 ounces. And it turns out that that's exactly what goes into a gallon of fuel, of gas. So this could be written as part 1, part 2, okay? This is the gallon, 1G, okay? So we've got 2.5 ounces, got to get my decimal point in there, to 1 gallon, okay? Now let me just describe how this is a part 1 and part 2. So after you pour that 2.5 ounces into a gallon, now you have a larger whole, okay? The whole is now 1 gallon. I should be using a different color, sorry. The whole, can you still read whole? Yeah, kind of. The whole is part 1 plus part 2. So if you know off the top of your head that there's 128 ounces in a gallon, 128 ounces, and you add 2.5 to that, you now have 130.5 ounces. And that's your new whole, is 130.5 ounces. So when you're trying to add unequal quantities like 2.5 ounces in 1 gallon, it's always not necessarily the easiest, but it's probably the safest maneuver to reduce those to the least common unit of measure, which in this case was ounces. So I can go down and look at how many small ounces are in one big gallon, right? There's 128 ounces in a gallon. Anyway, hopefully this helps, because when you start to look at things like, you might hear this proportion, which actually turns out to be, and if you do the arithmetic, you'll figure out that this is true. It's a ratio of oil to gas of 1 to 50. Now, usually when you state a ratio, it has no units associated with it. So 50 to 1, again, if you measured this out, did the multiplication, so 1 times 2.5 and 50 times 2.5, you'll come up with 128 ounces to 2.5 ounces. And that's why a ratio would be given without units, because they're assuming you're going to apply units to it, like how many cups are in a quart for, maybe you put so many cups of sugar into, let's just say a 2-quart container of lemonade. How many cups of sugar go into that? Well, once you establish a ratio of, say, 1 cup to 2 quarts, then when you move that up to a gallon, there's 4 quarts in a gallon. So the 2-quart container you made before with 1 cup now requires 2 cups, because you have twice as much lemonade, you'll need twice as much sugar. So hopefully this helps with covering fractions and ratios, and then proportions are basically comparing 2 ratios and making sure that something is in proportion to, right? Does that make some sense? I hope so. Anyway, hopefully this helps you with your homework this week.